I'm going to talk about Android slices. How many of you have heard of Android slices? Has any of you actually tried it? No? Awesome. So this is exactly the right place to be then. First, I'll give a quick context. So slices were introduced in the previous Google I/O last May. The idea is that so they are kind of UI like this is the kind of description you can when you search for slices you'll find online. UI templates or interactive snippets from your app, and so they allow you to display rich, dynamic, and interactive content from your app outside of your app. So in other apps like Google Search, Google Assistant, or any app can implement an API called Slice View, and that will allow basically those apps to display pieces of your app in their apps. Like in this example, we will see other examples later, so I won't focus on that. So this is slices are built into Android Jetpack, so you can use it pretty much down to Android 4.4, which covers 95% of the Android devices. So quickly, I'll mention Android App Actions. So initially, when they announced slices and they also announced Android App Actions, these were very tightly coupled. That's why I'll quickly mention. Have you ever heard of App Actions, which are not exactly same as the actions on Google, but actually that was pretty similar. So the idea with App Actions is that on the right side, you see, like for example, when you select a text on any Android device, the operating system basically understands that, for example, in this case, Beyonce is a singer, and Spotify app can play music, like her songs in this case. So it directly suggests an app, completely like unrelated, some like random app. In this case, this is just Chrome screenshot. And on the left side is so with Android Pie, now there is this like I think it's the Pixel Launcher. So the top row is that, how to say it, it's the like 5 apps that you are most likely to use at that moment. This is kind of a prediction by OS again. And the second line is 2 actions from particular apps. In this case, one is WhatsApp, another is the phone dialing app. So it's just basically, again, at that moment, what you are likely to do is just trying to make it easier for you. So when you, for example, connect an earphone, it suggests you to open either Google Play Music or, again, Spotify or those kind of things. So again, this was introduced at Google I/O as well. And the idea was that you use slices and app actions together. Recently, I've heard that right now they suspended the work on app actions, so they're not working on it right now because they had some difficulties with the implementation. But slices are still a go, so that's fine. Now let's look at the implementation for slices. Getting started is pretty easy. There's a wizard for that. So you just create a new slice provider. Then you fill in the fields, the name, the host URL, which is the basically base URL for you. Then authorities are, the first one is pretty much your package name, which you can customize, of course. And the second URL authorities part is just the path you want to capture with this provider. And then once you do this, once you say finish here, it modifies your build cradle and adds these 3 dependencies. which we are going to use. The main one is obviously a slice core in the middle, and the last one is a builder, kind of a helper dependency. And it also adds this provider to your manifest file. Slice provider is basically a class that's extending the content provider superclass, basically. And it fills it with the content you just created. So that filled in the host name, schema, and those kind of things. And then it creates a class, in this case called the slice provider, which is extending the slice provider. And in this class, there is this function, which is onCreateSliceProvider. This is where you do the setup for your slice, what you need. You just fill here. And then return, once you are done, you return a Boolean, which is mostly true, hopefully. And then there is onMap intent to URI, where you receive an intent which contains the URL of which basically is launching the slice. And then you convert that to a URI. Again, this is actually already kind of filled method or function. So if you don't do anything, in most cases it works. If you need some custom needs, then you might need to modify it. And then finally, which the function we will focus on bind slice. This is basically where things happen. You get a URI again, and then you need to return a slice. The main thing to keep in mind here is that you should return the slice as soon as possible. So you should never do heavy operations here, like network calls, like, I don't know, long database reads and writes, those kind of things. It should be very basic and quick. Otherwise, like, there's no definitive explanation here, but like what I think is that, like, after some time, basically, there's a timeout kind of, and if you don't return your slice, then your slice just won't appear in the display. Okay, then let's start filling in this this method then. So on the first time you see this context check, kind of, if it's null or not. This just context is something you will always need with slices, because we are using these builders, like I mentioned, list builders, and it requires context. So if and context is coming from the content provider, since it's extending that. So again, if there's no context, then we don't need to proceed. And I will get into details of these builders, but first of all, again, you get the URI there. So you can either keep your path in the manifest file broad to capture multiple paths in one slice provider, so that you can just like do here if-elses or when operations. But in this case, it's just capturing everything that comes to this slice provider. And first time you run it, so first let me mention this app. There's an app called Slice Viewer, which is something you can download from a GitHub release by Google. So it's not an actually app that's on Play Store, or it's not a proper app. It's just an app where you can kind of test your slices. And yeah, this is actually the only place you can test your slices right now. So Google search or assistant apps are not actually displaying slices currently. So yeah, so you need to install this app before running your slice. And then once you run it first time, it asks for permission. So this is also something which is not yet very clear, but the idea is that the displayer of this slice should ask for permission of user to display content from another app. In this case, well, we just allow, and then we see that we see the URI there and the slice we actually built. So let's focus on the builder now. First of all, the builder constructor takes 3 parameters. The first one is context, like I mentioned before. The second one is the slice URI. We pass this so that if the displayer wants, then they can display the URI there. And the last one is a long value, which is the duration this slice is valid for. So you can kind of deprecate the slice after some time, or you can just keep it valid infinitively. And then, in general, why is it called list builder? Is that slices are pretty much lists of rows. So you can have in a slice, you can have multiple items under each other, and we will see the examples now. So in this case, for example, okay, first let me mention this. So first of all, how many of you are familiar with Kotlin? Okay, so in Kotlin, in this case, for example, in this add row function, you get it receives a listener, let's say, and then in there, it defines a row builder. So you get a row builder when you want to add a row, and then using that builder, you can, in this case, set title, for example, or we will do other things. Yeah. So the second thing you can do is set content description for accessibility reasons. You can set a subtitle. Then you can set title items or end items, also called. So in this case, for example, you can put there a integer, or long, I think actually it's a long. In this case, for example, we get the current time and then subtract 60,000 milliseconds. And this automatically gets converted into human readable 1 minute ago, for example, in this case. So you can use this for time-sensitive things in your app, in your slice. Or you can set icons. Again, it takes 2 parameters. First one is icon, which you get from resources in this case. And the second one is the style of the icon or image. In this case, it's an icon again. One thing to note is that when you have 2 of them, obviously the last one is overriding the previous ones. And so in this case, time is not visible. There is a way to show both of them, which we will see in a second. But again, when we get back to the icon, you can show, instead of an icon, you can show an image, actually. You can also show it, make it bigger, but in this case, this viewer doesn't display it as a big image. Again, one thing to focus here is that on this right top, you see icon. This is part of this slice viewer by Google, but the general idea is that slices can be displayed in 3 ways, 3 versions, let's say. One is this, just one line view, which in this case is visible. Another is an icon view, and another is the full size. If you have multiple rows, for example, you can see all the rows. The reason behind this is that the displayer can decide that either there's no space for all the slices, or it can basically show the most prioritized slice as a full size, and then the rest maybe smaller. So For like many reasons, basically, the slice viewer can decide to show your slice in 3 different versions. And this particular app is allowing you to choose that so that you can try in different versions. And then again, like I said, there's the full view, which in this case, it doesn't matter, it's only one line anyway. Like I mentioned, you can display both icons, or well, icon and a time in this case, in one line by doing add end item instead of set title item. And then you can have multiple rows, of course, because it's a list. And again, if you focus on this right top, again, right now we have 3 items, but if slice viewer wants, it can reduce it to just 1 title item. The important thing here is that like this title item should be meaningful, considering it might be the only item that your slice will show. So while you can like show other information here, just to keep in mind that like this, when it's shown alone, just 1 item, it should still be meaningful. And then you can make your slices actually interactive. So they are not just to show information, but also do stuff. How do we achieve this? We add a primary action to the, well, in this case, the first row, basically. So this primary action, set primary action method takes a slice action parameter, and that is basically, it has a builder, so you can just use the builder to create one. It takes a pending intent, then it takes an icon. So in this case, it's not visible, again, depending on the slice viewer, but you might think of it as a button, basically. Once you do this, it makes the whole line a kind of a list item, a button. And in general, you can think of this as a notification, because the logic is same. It again takes a pending intent, for example, in this case. And then, yeah, in this case, for example, the pending intent has the activity as a destination. So when you click on it, it just opens your app. But instead of that, because this is not very useful for the user, you can actually let them do that change directly there. So in this case, for example, let's assume that we have an app and it has a setting called node mode in it. So you can allow users to enable the node mode directly from the app, from the slice. To do that, instead of passing an activity to the intent, we pass a broadcast receiver. And then the broadcast receiver, in this case, it just shows a toast. But ideally, obviously, you would change your setting. I don't know, save it to your database or shared preferences. Do those kind of things. And then, on top of this, you can you can add a slider or a progress bar. Well, you can call it that way. The idea here is that, well, again, you have a toggle, but again, in this example, you want to actually set the intensity of this node mode, so you can just add a slider. You can set the title of the second item, subtitle, the maximum value, and the initial value. This is pretty hard-coded, so we will just change it a little bit in the future. But in this slide action method there, if you focus on that, the previous action method was returning actually a slice action, but in this case, it just returns a pending intent because we did all the setup already here. And then another broadcast receiver, which is focused on this slice, is just again showing another toast when you change the value of the slider. Again, instead of making it hard-coded, what you can do is to, like very simple solution or workaround, let's call it. You can create a field, a static field in the another broadcast receiver class for the current value of the intensity. So in this case, for example, we have initial value 37 again, but when you change it, it will actually display the slice, the value, the current value in the slice. So the main thing here is that to focus is this content resolver. So once you change something, this is actually also the main way how you can update your slice later. So if you have, for example, some network operation or some big calculation to do before displaying your slice. So let's say you are displaying something from your online database. In order to do that, you first display your slice when it's needed, and you show, instead of the value, you show, for example, loading. And then you do this on the background with a broadcast receiver or a service, doesn't really matter. And then to update your slice, you just change the URI, and in the URI you can pass the actual value somehow, depending on your URI setup. And then you call this content resolver to update your slice. So once you call this, it will just basically, for example, in this case, it was 37, and then we did this, and then once you slide it, this current intensity value changes. You basically can update the slice. It's not just one way. You can communicate both ways. In terms of code, this is pretty much it. The current state is that it's not very good, really. So like I mentioned, there is this slice Viewer Apk, which you can download from GitHub, a Google repository. And there's no way to actually run it on a real app for now. But like I mentioned, for example, this was one of the things at Android Dev Summit that they actually had sessions and they had a stand for that. So they are working on it. So hopefully soon we will see slices in Google App initially, and then Assistant and some maybe other third-party apps. And the promise is that, like, these are the examples they shared at Google I/O. So the first one is, for example, when you try to get a ride, or I don't know, time to, like, I don't know, get me home or something. When you search such things at Google, before even actually searching it, before actually clicking on the search button, you can see, like in this case, Lyft app, just jumping up there and like giving you all this information completely outside of Lyft app. So you don't even need to remember that you have Lyft installed. You just write a you just start searching get a ride, and Google, Android or like operating system just suggests your app to the user. Like this, actually, we can give as an example to using this broadcast receiver, or in general, doing something on the background. So this is a slice that like shows how, like, what is the distance from your current location to your home or work, and then it also shows you the estimated price for that ride. To do this, you need to do some background work, probably some internet is also involved. So what you should do normally is to just display a placeholder slice with a loading, just some loading, either progress bar or just loading 3 dots text, and then do all the calculation, and with a content resolver, you just update your slice with all the information. Another example is the settings app. So when you search, again, data, for example, you can just directly turn on or off your mobile data or data roaming without actually going to the settings app. And finally, the Photos app can display like your photos from the place that you are currently searching in the Google app, Google search app. Yeah, this is pretty much it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions. Yes, that's something I actually got pretty often, the question. So the question is, if you have both, in the first example, if you have both Lyft and Uber installed, how does the OS choose which one to show on top? Sorry? Yeah, but still, which one on top, for example, even if it shows both. And in most cases, it wouldn't show both because, well, the space is limited, kind of. So I did ask this also to the people who are building slices. And the answer was like there are a lot of calculations behind it, obviously. But the main idea is that it depends on which one user is using most, or which one they used most recently, or, for example, if they showed, like, if they searched for this and saw both slices, like both Uber and Lyft in the past, and they chose like Lyft, then it will prefer Lyft in the future. So it all depends on the user's past usage of the apps. Makes sense to me. And I also did ask, like, can they, like, is there a way to kind of pay? Because, like, on search app, for example, you can get like these promoted results on top. Currently, there's no way. I mean, I don't think there will be ever, because it kind of doesn't make sense. The idea is to help, in this case, for Android perspective, to help users perform some certain actions quickly and for their preferred apps. So I don't think there will be such way. At least they said no for now.